Hello, I'm Roz Atkins. Welcome to World Have Your Say. Today, we're going to speak to the super rich. It's a group of people which rarely goes short of criticism and demands. And in this week, when Bill Gates has said they should pay more tax, when Mitt Romney has had to defend how much tax he's paying, and now the head of the Royal Bank of Scotland's being given a bonus well in excess of $1 million, we're going to give them a right of reply to all of your criticisms. We'll be joined by multi-millionaires in Davos, Glasgow, Nairobi and New York, and they're ready to talk with each other and with you about whether they owe their societies more than they're currently giving. We're using the WHYS and the super rich hashtag, and wherever you're watching the BBC in the world, you're very welcome to take part. Well, we're already getting so many questions for our guests. Do keep them coming. We'll get through as many as we can in the next hour. If you're on Twitter and following the show, you can get me at BBC Roz Atkins and the programme at BBC_WHYS. And as I was saying, we are using the super rich hashtag as well as our usual one today. Before all that, though, let's go through the main stories of the moment. The head of the Arab League monitoring mission in Syria says that violence there has significantly risen in the past 3 days and has called for an immediate end to the killings. Activists say government forces have launched an attack on the city of Hama. Officials in Iraq say at least 24 people died in a blast near a funeral procession in a mainly Shia area of Baghdad. An official says it was caused by a suicide bomber driving a car laden with explosives. Spain's latest unemployment figure is out, and it's 5.3 million, with 23% of the workforce now without a job. That's the highest rate in the developed world and twice the European average. And the presidents of Sudan and South Sudan are meeting in Ethiopia to try and resolve a worsening dispute over oil. South Sudan exports its oil through Sudanese pipes, but the two countries can't agree on transit fees, and Sudan says it's been taking oil in lieu of payment, something that unsurprisingly South Sudan is not too enthusiastic about. Well, let's meet our guests, starting in Nairobi with Chris Karubi, one of Kenya's best-known businessmen. He has a business which includes property, media, manufacturing and biochemicals. And according to Forbes, he's Kenya's second richest man. Chris, thank you very much for coming on the programme. Perhaps you could pick out some facts and figures to tell us all about your wealth and your business.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm happy to be here today, and I'm Chris Kirubi. I'm a businessman in Kenya and in the region. And as you just said, I'm involved with many type of businesses. I worked for other people before, and then after some time I decided, well, why don't I do it for myself? And I'm happy I did it. I failed in some businesses, but I'm glad that some of the businesses have taken off, and I'm happy. I employed so many people in Kenya and Uganda, and really, you need people who are doing well so to be able to create jobs, yeah.
Well, Chris, we appreciate you coming on. Let's go from Nairobi to New York and meet Dr. Eric Schoenberg. He's chairman of Campus Works, an IT management and strategy firm, a former investment banker and also now an associate professor at Columbia Business School. Sir, thank you for joining us. Can you pick out some facts and figures to help us understand your wealth and your business?
Sure. I have an unusual background in that I come from a wealthy family. My father was a very successful early entrepreneur in the technology industry, built quite a substantial company that he ended up selling in the late 1980s. I myself had a career on Wall Street. I was a partner in an investment bank focused on technology companies. And more recently, I became the chairman of this company, Campus Works, which provides technology services for institutions of higher education. As you noted, I also teach a class in behavioral economics at Columbia Business School. I have a doctorate in psychology.
And we appreciate you coming on World Have Your Say. Now, let's shift to Glasgow and bring in Michelle Moan, OBE, founder and co-owner of the lingerie company MJM International, which makes, among many others, the Ultimo brand. Thank you very much for joining us. Give us a few facts and figures about you.
Okay, well, of course, you just said I'm from Glasgow. I started up my business 15 years ago. I didn't go to university or anything. I left school at 15 with no qualifications, but I had a dream to be an entrepreneur, and started 15 years ago, and Ultimo is now the biggest lingerie designer brand in the country. I sit on the board for the Prince's Trust. I do a lot of charity work, and yes, as you said, I was awarded an OBE by the Queen last year.
Well, all three of you, it's fantastic to have you on World Have Your Say. Our viewers are itching to speak with you. If you're watching and have questions for all of our guests, you can use the Super Rich hashtag. If you're on Twitter, you can also get us at facebook.com/World Have Your Say. I've got one last question for the three of you before we bring in our viewers. I wonder what percentage of your income you give away to charity. Michelle, perhaps I could ask you first.
I probably give away about 10% at the moment. I do a lot with Cash for Kids, breast cancer, and several organisations, and I personally help out with situations that just come up every single day. But I do my bit. I would like to do more, but you can only do so much.
And Eric?
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer because my income is very variable from year to year. I calculated actually for 2009, I think I gave away something like 20%, but probably on the whole it's closer to about 10%.
And Chris, what about you?
Well, I normally don't even calculate the percentages. It depends very much on the area of my operation. I'm very involved in HIV and AIDS issues. I'm involved with creating opportunities for young people to go to schools. I create lots of bursaries, and I also help lots of people who come to me who have family issues, family problems, funerals, and many other things. And I do lend money to startups, and really I go on and on as far as I can. So like everybody else, maybe 10–20% of my income goes to support other people.
Well, we've learned quite a lot about all three of you. Let's bring in our viewers to put their questions to you, starting with Mark, who's on the phone. Mark, tell us where you are and what point you'd like to make.
I'm calling from Virginia in the United States, and the point I'd like to make is that I don't feel that it's the responsibility of the wealthy to take care of anyone else but themselves. And I want to ask the panel, do you feel you have a responsibility to other people more than just yourself?
So the question is, do you three feel a responsibility to help society, or should any help you offer simply be your own decision? Eric, let's start with you, but all three of you feel free to join in and pick up off one another.
Yeah, I don't think I use the term responsibility. I think it's in my own self-interest to help other people. As I noted, I am a psychologist, and I actually do work with wealthy families talking about the psychological meaning of money. And it is my view that you give money for causes you believe in. When you do this, you feel good about yourself, and other people feel good about you too. And that's a win-win situation. So I do not take the position that it is inherently the responsibility of the wealthy to give. I think it's in their own enlightened self-interest to give.
Michelle?
Well, my mum and dad have always brought me up with the saying, work hard, play hard, and give something back. I do believe personally that successful people shouldn't be successful if they don't give something back. Personally, it gives me a big kick when I bring someone home in an air ambulance that's stuck, that's been in a coma, etc. It's so much nicer than buying a car. So it gives me a real big kick. I think when you start out in your business, you have all these different goals where you want the cars, you want the houses, etc. But once you bypass all of that, your life does change. But as long as I can go to bed at night and get up in the morning and look myself in the mirror and I'm proud of what I do, then that's what matters.
Chris, what about you? Have you got a responsibility to help Kenyans?
Oh, for me, we Africans, we have a tradition. You must support other, especially close families and distant families, and then the society, the village people near you. We are involved as a culture that you must support each other. In Africa, you will not go hungry if the next door neighbor has some food to eat. We share what we have, and as a result, it's very common, very traditional for people to expect support from me, and as long as they don't abuse that privilege. So I have pride in supporting relatives, in supporting young people, in supporting orphans, and as long as it's not made into a law so that you feel you are obligated. Of course, the law is there. We are taxed for what we earn. And we do hope that governments also uses those funds to support the people that we hope they should be supporting.
And Chris, I have to tell you...
Obviously, we get...
Sorry to interrupt you. I just have to tell you that as the three of you are describing what you're doing, there is already some cynicism coming in. Sly in Oklahoma has posted on our Facebook page, I fear a lot of charities that the rich contribute to are more for bragging rights and PR than for building up humanity. I fear a lot of charities... Oh, and then that's just the same again. But what about that point, Eric? Do you agree that perhaps some businessmen give to charity because it improves their public image?
Oh, undoubtedly true. And I don't have a problem with that, frankly. I mean, I think that, concern about other people's opinion of you is a valuable way that society gets people to act in broadly social ways. But I would make this point, which is this is exactly why I'm a member of a group called Patriotic Millionaires that has been advocating quite vociferously in favor of higher taxes on the wealthy here in the United States. And our position is precisely that we have no problem with philanthropy. Most of the people in this organization are very, very philanthropic. But we believe at the end of the day that the collective entity that our government represents has to make decisions about the best use of tax dollars. And so we believe that philanthropy is not enough. Government is not a philanthropy. Government is the mechanism that we have to try and ensure that society works for everybody. And so I agree with the basic point, but I wouldn't let cynicism get the better of you. When people support things that are important, I think it's worthwhile to acknowledge that.
We're getting calls from Uganda, Norway, Zambia, Kenya, Somalia and Cameroon. I can see a message here from Barak in Nigeria questioning how much tax Mitt Romney's been paying. And of course, that's been a big issue in the last week or so. But perhaps the biggest single issue relating to the super rich today, certainly, and perhaps the whole week, is Stephen Hester, the head of the Royal Bank of Scotland. We now know he'll be getting over $1 million worth of shares as a bonus. Lots and lots of criticism coming into the BBC about that. Carl in the UK posted this up on bbc.com/news. He writes, very few people are capable of undertaking a job at this level and make a success of it. To attract and retain such people, the UK must be seen as a centre of excellence that rewards to a global standard. So the question I would put to all three of you is, would you have paid this bonus? Michelle Moan in Glasgow.
Well, I think that if the guy has been set his KPIs and performance-related measures are being put in place and he has achieved all of that, then that's why he was attracted to the job. We have got to attract these good people into our country. And if he's achieved the job and if he's achieved his targets, then he deserves to be rewarded for that. Whether, the Royal Bank of Scotland, whether they should be handing out bonuses like that, well, that's another story. I think it's a bit high, but we've got to keep these people attracted to these top jobs.
What did you think, Chris? Would you pay that in your business?
I would, and I do. I pay my people much better than I even pay myself, simply because if you do not have people performing jobs, tasks, and making a success of it, if you do not have investors taking a risk in their own funds, where would we create wealth? And I think it's very petty when people all over the world start getting jealousy and not appreciating success, because there is no other alternative in the world except to get people to be inspired by success. And only success will breed success. We cannot create jobs. We can't remove poverty in Africa if we have everybody poor. We have seen socialism. Socialism bred nothing but mentality of dependency, and really we need people to feel that they can make it work, and in making it work they are also creating jobs for others. And I hope Africa will glorify success and will glorify wealth so that we can all get out of the poverty and the dependence in begging and donations and everything else.
So I'd like to add a point to this. If I heard you correctly, you said the head of the Royal Bank is going to be receiving over $1 million in shares.
It's not the World Bank, it's the Royal Bank of Scotland.
Royal Bank of Scotland. Well, of course, it's somewhat amusing in the U.S. context because that would be considered a pittance. In the U.S. context, senior executives of banks are getting hundreds of millions of dollars. And so, I think it's an important question. I don't disagree with either Michelle or Chris that as a businessman, I think it's important to provide proper incentives for people. I don't begrudge anybody's success. I do think this notion that people are only properly incentivized by extremely large amounts of money is somewhat problematic. That is not the only motivation that people have. And I think in a certain sense, part of the problem that has emerged globally about the issues of the super wealthy is that people evaluate their circumstances by comparison with other people. And there's been this ratcheting upward where, and again, in the American context, no CEO wants to only earn $1 million when they see their peers earning $2, $3, or $10 million. So I think there is a broader social issue here. And, it is by no means clear how you decide what somebody is really worth.
Well, Eric,
I would agree with Chris. I would agree with Chris in saying that the capitalism is the best mechanism that we've come up with to try and do that, but we should not be under the illusion that it's perfect.
Well, Eric, I'm listening to you and wanting to ask you about 5 different questions in response to what you're saying. I'm sure our viewers are having the same experience. We're going to pause for a break for a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back. We've got 3 multi-millionaires, one in Nairobi, one in Glasgow, one in New York. We'll also be joined by a Russian billionaire after past, and all of them are happy to talk to you about how they made their wealth, the amount they have now, and also how they give back to society. Hi, I'm Ros Atkins. Thank you very much indeed for being with me here on World Have Your Say. We're live on BBC World News talking about the super rich, but not just talking about them, talking with them, because all of our guests today are multi-millionaires and they've come on air to talk with you about the money they've made and how they're using it. Let's bring in Ben from the World Have Your Say team, who's there with the rest of the gang taking calls. Ben, what have you got?
Well, some more places you're calling in from today: Trinidad, Pakistan, Cameroon, Morocco and Ontario so far. A lot of you talking about the responsibilities that you feel the rich have to others. Bauko, who's in Kano in Nigeria, wants to know also about the struggles you all might have had to make it to the stage you're at now. Nazim in Kenya says he's an ordinary person. Rich people should help other people. Mohammed in Nigeria says it's their responsibility to create job opportunities not only in their own country but in poorer countries. And that's partly Gary in Southern California's point as well. He talks about rich people owing society the ability to create jobs. Gary's actually behind me in our Google Plus hangout. I'm going to go online now, back with those guys and talk to them about the discussion we're having on TV. If you'd like to join in this conversation, you can log on, search for World Have Your Say on Google Plus, or comment in all the usual ways, and the phone number of course is on the screen through the show.
And Ben, just a quick word about this Google Plus hangout, because we've not done this during the TV programme before. If someone's watching now and wants to get involved, what do they have to do?
Sure, just log on to Google Plus, search for World Have Your Say. You should find us pretty easily from there, and then just click join this hangout on the stream, and hey presto, you'll be able to talk directly to me, but not only to me, more importantly Gary and all the other people who are going to join us too.
Thank you very much indeed, Ben. The number to call if you'd like to get through to Ben and the rest of the team is country code 44 2070 83 72 72. I can see Luke is watching us in Indianapolis. He says, my problem with the super rich isn't rooted in envy, it's rooted in the fact that in order to become a super rich person, you have to be super selfish. Hi, Ross Atkins. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. At the end of a week when Bill Gates has said the super rich should pay more tax, Mitt Romney's had to defend the level of tax he's been paying. And now we have this bonus for the head of the RBS. He's getting over $1 million worth of shares for his work this week. And Eric in New York, one of our multi-millionaire guests, actually said that was a pittance. But the question I have for you, Eric, is if you advertised the job and you said, I'll pay you $1 million straight to run a bank very effectively, I'm sure there are any number of economists and bankers who would take up that challenge.
Oh, I agree with you. Well, you know, the issue, of course, is if you're in charge, responsible for a very large bank, you don't want to just get any average individual. You want to get the person that you feel is going to be able to create the greatest value. And of course, if you're running an institution that has, many $billion of assets, as the RBS would have, the right person who can simply add an additional, 1% of value is worth whatever you're going to pay them. The problem is how you do that measurement. And, there is no obvious way to do it. That's just the way it is. So the way, as somebody who teaches behavioral economics, a lot of the time you're simply trying to come up with a justification. And I do think, let me be clear, I think that executive compensation has gotten out of control. I will note that the people involved in this program are entrepreneurs who are basically in charge of their own entities that they've created and built. You have to distinguish between the returns that accrue to an entrepreneur who puts themselves on the line and the amount that's paid to an individual who comes in to run a large pre-existing institution. That's where I think there's more of an issue. What are those people really worth? But again, I am a believer in capitalism. And so my view is that the role of government is to apply a rate of taxation that is appropriate to whatever people are earning. I don't think the government should be in the business of deciding how much individuals should get paid for particular jobs.
Eric, thank you very much indeed. Those people just joining us, our guest today are Chris Kirubi, one of Kenya's best known and successful businessmen. He's live from Nairobi. Live from Glasgow is Michelle Moan. She's head and co-founder and the person at the top of a very, very large lingerie company worth many millions of pounds. And Eric Schoenberg is live with us from New York, a former investment banker, now runs a very large IT management and security company. Well, all three of you, thank you very much indeed for being with us. Let's bring in Callum. He's in New Zealand and he's just called us up. Callum, what's your question?
Do you believe it is possible to become wealthy without exploiting needs or manipulating consumers into purchasing goods or services that they do not necessarily need?
Thank you very much indeed. Maybe, Michelle, you could start with this. Can you have a successful business without exploiting consumers? And I would add to that, we've had loads of messages. Can you have a successful business without exploiting workers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at Ultimo, we have a very strong ethical code of practice in 4 of our factories in China. We could make in Bangladesh and make higher profits, but I'm not prepared to go there as a mother and have, kids making our lingerie. So we have rules where you have to be over 18 and above. You can't work weekends. And, you can't work more than 8 hours a day, and they're paid more than the minimum wage in China. It's a whole other debate why we're not creating these jobs in the UK. Well, we do create a lot of jobs in the UK, but manufacturing is basically gone in the UK in terms of clothing. It all takes place in the Far East. So yes, I can go to bed at night, I can sleep, I can get up, and I feel good about myself because I'm not exploiting anyone. And we're giving them a good lifestyle, and we've got a good lifestyle over here as well. But I'd just like to add the point that can I just make people clear that I am an entrepreneur. There's many entrepreneurs out there. We put our lives on the line every single day in terms of putting up our houses to the bank, taking risks, and we do that to create businesses, and we do that to create employment as well. As we earn more money, I personally give more to charity. So, I would just like people to give us a break. I'm not prepared to pay any more tax. I'm a high rate taxpayer, and if you keep punishing the high rate taxpayers in this country, then they'll move. And
well,
what will
Michelle,
that
I'm
mean?
interested. You say give us a break, and I'm curious to ask all of you. You're very, very wealthy. Chris, do you get fed up with the amount of criticism that comes the way of the super rich?
Well, you come across some jealousy people who would like to be who you are, but they don't work as hard. So you kind of have to ignore the minority. But most of the people appreciate what a wealthy man can do in a society. When I was coming to this program, my own staff, they told me, go and say we are proud of you, we like you because you made us rich. I think you cannot pick any benefit from a lazy, a spend-free guy. I know somebody said that to be rich, you have to be very mean and
Chris,
very, you know.
You've used the word a couple of times I'm very interested to talk about after the half-past news, which is jealousy. I wonder if those of you being critical are simply jealous. Hi, I'm Ros Atkins. Thanks for joining me on World Have Your Say. Well, over the past few years, many of you have contacted the BBC to say that the super rich earn far too much and give back far too little. Well, now is a chance to speak directly to some of them. In a moment, we'll be joined live by multi-millionaires from the UK, Kenya, Russia and America, and all are happy to answer your questions about their wealth and what they do with it. We're across the hashtags WHYS and super rich, and wherever you're watching in the world, we're live here on the BBC, and you're very welcome to take part. Well, our multi-millionaire guests are all ready to go, but as always, the news comes first every half hour here on the BBC. So let's start with the situation in Syria. The head of the Arab League monitoring mission there says that violence has risen significantly in the past 3 days and has called for an immediate end to the killings. Activists say government forces have launched an attack on the city of Hama. Officials in Iraq say at least 24 people died in a blast near a funeral procession in a mainly Shia area of Baghdad. An official says it was caused by a suicide bomber driving a car laden with explosives. Spain's unemployment figure has hit 5.3 million, with 23% of the workforce without a job. That's the highest rate in the developed world and twice the European average. And the presidents of Sudan and South Sudan are meeting in Ethiopia to try and resolve a worsening dispute over oil. South Sudan exports its oil through Sudanese pipelines, but the two countries can't agree on transit fees, and Sudan says it's been taking oil in lieu of payment, something that unsurprisingly South Sudan is not so enthusiastic about. Let me introduce you, or reintroduce you if you've been watching from the beginning of the programme, to our guest. Live from Nairobi is Chris Kirubi, one of Kenya's best known and most successful businessmen. In Glasgow, we have Michelle Moan, behind one of the biggest lingerie companies in the UK, which he founded 15 years ago. And live from New York is Dr. Eric Schoenberg, chairman of Campus Works, which is an IT management and strategy firm. He was also an investment banker. Well, all three of you, thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme. I think one question our viewers would like to hear you all answer was, what was the moment you realised that you really were going to be very, very rich, and how did it feel? Maybe Chris, you could start.
Well, I can sleep, it feels good, and as I used my wealth to support those in really dire need, create jobs for the young people, invest in new ventures, and also pay taxes, which hopefully I hope government can use them wisely and economically to support the rest of the population. So I feel I have a role to play in the world and in my country, especially when the country is so considered to be
Chris,
not so wealthy.
Chris, I appreciate you see a role for yourself now, but just take us back to that. Was there a moment for you where you realised that you weren't just going to be earning a few $100,000, which in itself would make you very rich? Was there a moment when you realised, wow, I'm going to have hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars here. I've got that rich.
Well, you know, to be rich, if you are doing it the right way, it takes a lot of hard work. It takes planning. It takes patience. It takes many years to work. I came from very poor background. And for my studies, I went all over the world. I spent time at Harvard studying business school. I then worked for many companies, and eventually I decided I have enough skills to do my own, and luckily enough, I ventured into properties, ventured into manufacturing, ventured into courier business, ventured into chemical industry, and I continue even now to open up new businesses. I'm a farmer. I grow a lot of coffee. I should send you some coffee from my farm.
You're very welcome to. I'm sure we'd all appreciate it here at World Have Your Say. What about you, Michelle? Because you've only had this business for 15 years, which is not such a long time. Was there one moment when you realised you weren't just going to do well with this business, you were going to make millions and millions of dollars?
Well, I suppose it was about 10 years ago when Julia Roberts wore Ultimo in Erin Brockovich, the movie, and that then gave us world success. But, you know, it's been a real roller coaster for me, where a distributor in America ran away with £1.6 million of my cash. I then had to put my house up to security of the bank. So I've taken lots of risks along the way. That's been 3 times now I've done that. But I suppose it was only really 5 years ago, and the business is 15 years ago I started, that I really thought, well, you know, actually I'm really comfortable and I can help out others a lot more. And I, you know, can put my cash line card in the hole in the wall and it doesn't spit out and tell me where to go. So, you know, life is good, but, you know, nothing is ever certain in life. You don't know what tomorrow will bring. And, you know, that's what keeps me going all the time and teaching others. I'm a world speaker around the world, inspirational speaker. And I always say to people, if you're really, really unhappy with your life, be it your home life, be it your weight, be it your career, it's only you that can change that. So don't blame others around you. Blame yourself for not changing it. And jealousy is a horrible thing. So if you're jealous, then there must be something that you're unhappy with in your life that you need to change.
Well, Michelle, stay right there, because in a moment we're going to speak to Catherine, who's from Glasgow but has phoned up from Sri Lanka to speak to you. But just before we do, Eric, I must ask you the same question, just briefly if you would. Was there a moment when you realised you really were going to be very, very rich, and how did it feel?
Well, you know, this is an important question because, as I said when I introduced myself, I come from a background of wealth. So unlike Chris, in my own case, there wasn't a lot of hard work involved in becoming wealthy. I just needed to survive to adulthood, basically. There wasn't a moment either, by the way. My father started his business when I was 5 years old, so it was a very gradual thing. And this is something that I think is very important, which is, first of all, in my own life, I have derived much greater satisfaction from the money that I made myself than anything that I was given from others. And, you know, this goes back to my belief that it's not really about, you know, building up a large amount of money that you can spend. It's about feeling you're making a difference. And that, I think, I speak to lots of entrepreneurs, and by and large, entrepreneurs will tell you that they derive the most satisfaction building their businesses rather than enjoying the fruits of their labors. And going back to an earlier question, which is, you know, do you have to be very selfish? Do you have to do bad things to become wealthy? I don't believe that for a moment. I mean, if you look at Steve Jobs, this is a man who created products that hundreds of millions of people derive enormous satisfaction from. Americans in particular, though I think this is true of people across the globe, do not begrudge people who are wealthy because they've provided goods and services that other people value. What bothers people is the feeling that the system is unfair.
Well,
and I draw attention in particular to the issue of inherited wealth. I'm a strong advocate in favor of very high estate taxes because I do not believe that people should be able to garner enormous amounts of wealth.
And you're talking about estate taxes, other people would call it inheritance tax. Let me just jump in there because I don't want to keep Catherine in Sri Lanka waiting too much longer. Emmanuel in Kenya says, as a Kenyan, Chris Karubi's definitely doing a lot of charity work, but I worry this is creating a culture of dependency. And Sertak in Brussels says, the only social responsibility these rich people have is not to be a burden to others. Now, let's bring in Catherine. You're from Glasgow, but ringing up from Sri Lanka. What's your question for Michelle Moan?
My question to Michelle. Michelle, I met you 15 years ago in your office in Govan.
Oh,
And you were
right.
starting out, and you actually had Kenny Melver working for you at the time. I was a lovable person for 28 years and in the garment industry for 54 now. I came to see you because you were looking for a designer. You must remember me, Mrs. Michelle, I can't design. I can do everything else for you. And you introduced me to your dad that day, who was sitting in a wheelchair packing for you. You also told me you put your house up for another mortgage again. You deserve everything you get. You have worked hard. Just like you've said a few minutes ago, if you work hard and you focus and you follow your dream, you can do anything. These people are sitting out there that want something handed in their lap without working hard. Forget it. You've got to work hard, Michelle.
So, Catherine, it's more a message rather than a question, one of support for Michelle, saying hard work is the key, as Michelle's been emphasising. Tanner's called from Jamaica to say, I don't think they owe me something. The only thing I want from them is to create employment. Well, all three of our guests have been talking about that. Mohammed called from Nigeria to say, it's responsibility of rich people to create job opportunities in poorer countries. It's their responsibility as much as it is government's. And if you do want to call up, the number is country code 44 2070 83 72 72. All of our lines are going, so if you don't get through immediately, I apologise. Now let's put up another message for our guest. Harshad in India posts on Facebook. He wants to say, are you satisfied with life? Well, perhaps Chris, you could go first.
Oh my! I wish I was. I keep on changing. I keep on changing my goals from one day to the other. I set myself bigger height to climb. I'm never settled. I'm never satisfied. I know I'm lucky than many other people, but I keep on challenging myself, and that's what keeps me alive and keeps me going. The day you have to sit and just spend money, it's not exciting for me. Making money, creating new opportunities, taking on new challenges, this is what keeps me alive.
So that's your answer to a happiness question. Here's one from Abdu in Morocco. Eric, you could respond to this. He says, do wealthy people lead normal lives?
Well, it varies. I think I lead a fairly normal life. I mean, I don't fly private planes, for instance. I don't, I only have one home. To me, money represents one thing very simply, which is the freedom to do things that I find interesting. I do spend most of my time on academic work. I've done some research. I teach. I find that very enjoyable and engaging. And so to me, I'm satisfied with my life largely because I have the freedom to spend the time doing what I like to do.
So you think yours is a normal life. Michelle, you've described how you've gone from a relatively normal setup 15 years ago to having all of this money. Has it changed how you can live?
Well, I sort of thought when I started out my business 15 years ago, I actually wanted to, create a successful company and, of course, get wealth. But as you get more wealthy, it doesn't make you happier. You have to be happy within. And that's what I'm working on at the moment. Unfortunately, my business has cost me my marriage as well. So, I'm married to my job and that's the way it is at the moment, and I have to relook at that.
Thank you very much for answering those questions, all three of you. And by the way, I was mentioning we were hoping to speak to a Russian billionaire from Davos. I'm afraid that hasn't worked out, but as we've got three fantastic guests already, I'm sure we're not missing out too much. I wonder if we should take a very short break before coming back and speaking to our guests one last time. Hi, I'm Ros Atkins. We've just got a couple of minutes left with our three guests, Chris Karoubi in Nairobi, Michelle Moan in Glasgow, and Eric Schoenberg in New York. And I think a lot of our viewers are calling in to say the main thing here is we would simply like to be as wealthy as you are. So can I ask you all, and I would ask you to be brief because we're short on time, just to tell us the best thing about having all of this money. Eric, perhaps you can go first.
Well, I'd like to just make one point. There's been some research on this question. If you ask people how much money it would take for them to really not have to worry about money and be fully satisfied, whatever amount of money they have, they'll tell you they need about twice as much. So I think there is this element of always trying to want more. For me, as I said, the most satisfying thing about having money is recognizing that it gives you freedom, the freedom to do what you want with your time. It's not about having fancy stuff.
So it's free time for you. Michelle, what about you?
Well, I just think, as you just said, it gives you the opportunity. Money does not make you happy. And I think that every single day I worry about money, that it won't be there tomorrow and the company won't be there, etc. That's what drives me. That's what keeps me going. But, you know, instead of attacking all of us successful people who are creating wealth and creating jobs, I think the reason, and I want to make this point...
Briefly, if you would, Michelle.
The reason why we're in this financial crisis around the world is the banks are not lending, the banks are not supporting small businesses, the media and the government. If you sort out those three, then the country and the world will do well.
And Chris, in 20 seconds, what's the best thing about having hundreds of millions of dollars?
Is that you can help people, you can see what to do with yourself, you can have freedom to achieve more, you can set your goals and really continue trying to improve yourself and trying to do other things for other people.
You're talking about freedom as well. I'd like to hear more about it, but I'm interrupting you because we've got to hear from another very rich man. Bill Gates was on Wednesday's World Have Your Say radio show. He went to a school in South London, taking questions from the pupils there and children from all over the world. Here he is talking about one question that came in from a listener in, I'm not sure where actually, have a look.
Well, we saw that there's a modest number of diseases that really affect the poor. Malaria, HIV, tuberculosis, diarrhea, respiratory. And so those are our big priority, to create the vaccines and get them out to kids, and that'll drastically reduce the number of kids who die and let them develop so that their full mental and physical potential is available to them and their country.
Lots of people listening around the world have got in touch with us at World Have Your Say, saying, I don't have loads of money, it's difficult economic times, but what can I do as a small person to make a difference?
Well, certainly even small amounts given to charities like Save the Children and many, many others really do go a long way. People can volunteer to help out these groups. Certainly people's political voice to encourage their government to take the few percent of the budget that goes for aid and keep that a strong priority. That's very important because we have a risk that could be cut.
We've got hands going up in Nairobi, in Ekaterinburg, but let's start in Benghazi. I know, Omar, you have a question for Bill.
Mr. Gates, do you think that we could ever have a cure to cure AIDS?
A cure for AIDS?
Absolutely. There's two things we're pursuing. One is a vaccine that, if you didn't have AIDS, would block you from ever getting it. And that's pretty far along, and I'd say in 10 to 15 years, I do think we'll have that. For somebody who already has the disease, right now you have to take the drugs the rest of your life. We don't know how to get it out of your body. We are funding some people to work on that, but there's no guarantee when we'd be able to come up with that. It would be ideal, but very tough problem.
Who wants to ask a question in Nairobi?
Hi, it's Paulette. I would like to ask a question. How do we expose such diseases to the world?
Well, these diseases, many of them are not well known. In fact, some are called neglected diseases, the parasitic worm diseases that are really tough. Some have been gone from the rich countries for a long time. Malaria 50 years ago was up in Europe, but not now. And AIDS, although it's still here, the numbers are quite small, so people aren't thinking about it all the time. Tuberculosis, very, very rare. And so I use things like my annual letter to remind people that we still need to be focused on these problems. We get the drug companies to put their skills into them, and it's about equity. Ideally, people would travel the world more and come and actually meet the people who have the problems.
The final question before you go. Since you've focused your time working on your foundation, has your level of optimism gone up or down?
I'd say it's gone up. We have this economic crisis that creates some real budget challenges, but every year things are better. Less malaria deaths, new vaccines, new drugs. The world is getting richer. A lot of countries have it tough. but Brazil and China, they were aid recipients. Now they don't need to receive aid. And so we can focus on less countries, and even some of those countries can turn around and start to contribute themselves. So the ratio works in our favor, science works in our favor, and I'm still impatient that things aren't moving faster, but I am even more optimistic.
Наша интеграция.